fine.
The rest?
I've got it set.
Okay. This here. Do you want to read part of Psalm 27 or no?
I didn't have to bring the book with me.
Okay. So the reading from Emmett Fox is titled Light
I'll go
in
get the Bible while you're
Salvation,
reading it.
and it refers to Psalm 27. The 27th Psalm is one of the great meditations in the Bible. And when trouble of any kind comes into our life, it is because we have allowed our consciousness to fall to the level where fear and limitation can reach us. Any mental activity that enables us to raise the spiritual standard of the soul is a form of prayer, and the Bible abounds in such forms. The history of solving a problem is often this. An individual is worried about something, or he or she feels ill. And as soon as she realizes his state, he declines to accept the condition and proceeds to bring about the necessary raising of his thought. One can read this psalm carefully and interpret it spiritually, allowing the mind to dwell upon the principles enunciated, appropriates them to himself, thus regaining his peace of mind. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? This one verse is one of the most complete texts in the whole Bible. It might well be written over the portals of every church and school in the land, for within it is contained in embryo the complete Jesus Christ message. It postulates not merely the existence of God, but the living presence of God in man. The inner light is no mere passive or static presence, but a dynamic power, light, salvation, and strength. The Lord is the strength of my life. Having promised us light, the psalm now goes on to promise strength or power. We are in fact to be endued with power from on high, and need no longer trust to our own inadequate efforts. This wonderful verse then sums up its great message in the word salvation. And with the penetrating psychological skill, it obliges us to ask ourselves point blank what there is now to be afraid of. Light and salvation. I don't know. Okay.
So I'll read Psalm 27, and I'm reminded this is one of Sister Pepper's. For those of you who are new, Sister Pepper was the founder of our home church. One of her go-to psalms if someone was in turmoil. And this is from the Lamsa translation. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When evildoers come upon me to devour me, even my enemies and those who hate me, they together stumbled and fell. Though a host should encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war should rise against me, in this will I be confident. One thing have I asked of the Lord, that will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the delight of the Lord, and to be in charge of his temple. For in the day of trouble he shall hide me in his shelter. In the shadow of his tabernacle shall he hide me. He shall set me up upon a rock. And now shall my head be lifted up above mine enemies round about me. Therefore will I offer in his tabernacle sacrifices of joy. I will sing, yea, I will sing praises to the Lord. Hear, O Lord, my voice when I call upon thee. Have mercy also upon me and answer me. My heart said unto thee, let my face seek thy face. Turn not away thy face from me, O Lord. Trouble not thy servant in anger. Thou hast been my help, O Lord. Cast me not out, neither leave me, O my God and my Savior. Although my father and my mother have deserted me, the Lord has taken me up. Teach me thy way, O Lord, and lead me in thy right paths. Deliver me not over into the hands of my enemies, for false witnesses are risen up against me and have spoken cruelly. But I have believed to see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Trust in the Lord, and be of good courage. Yea, trust in the Lord. So with that intro, it seems that our speaker, Heidi Bright, is fitting right in. So, Heidi, what is the topic that you were talking about?
Well, my main topic is about grief when you've actually lost someone. But before we started this tonight, we talked about the grief can take many forms. It can be loss of a job, loss of a house, loss of a pet. So I'm going to speak in more generalities than if we've actually lost a person. But I will start out by explaining where my focus came from. I was diagnosed in 2009 with cancer of the uterus. I was first told it was stage 2, then I was told it was stage 3, and then they did a PET scan and discovered it was stage 4. Then it moved from my uterus to my lungs. So I was in for the fight of my life. And I ended up having, that was in 2009, I ended up having my first lung surgery in 2011. That was at the height of the opioid prescription problem in this country. I went home with an entire bottle of opioids, not knowing that's what they were. They were oxycodone. It wasn't a bottle that said opium on it or opioids. So I took 2 or 3, didn't need any more, put them in under my sink and forgot about them. Well, I had 2 children, and my firstborn got into them. He had insomnia. It was really bad. He'd be up in the middle of the night and unable to go to sleep. And then he would have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to catch the bus. So he was constantly tired. He had terrible insomnia. So his friends got him to smoke, and then they got him to drink, and then they got him to do marijuana. And he still wasn't satisfied, and he was very curious. So he went rifling through my pills and found the oxycodone and started smoking it. So he was addicted to heroin for a year. And then he told me, and I spent a year trying to get him into treatment. He went to treatment 3 times. The 4th time I tried to get him into treatment, he refused. And in June 2015, the police came to my door. They had found his body. Now, I had started psychotherapy in 2009 when I was diagnosed with cancer. So I had been in therapy every week for 6 years. And I will talk in the end about the 7th key to getting through grief, which is the main thing I learned from therapy. But there's some lighter things that I will share first. And definitely, Brian, the sense that God has turned God's face away from you when you grief is a very real feeling. In fact, I had this sensation of the light, like I had a light in my heart that just puffed out, gone. It was a strange physical sensation, but it was there. So anybody who has done serious grieving knows what that's like. And they also feel like their heart is literally breaking. It's a physical sensation. I thought I was having a heart attack on top of everything else. And it turns out there's something called broken heart syndrome. It's an actual physical condition that people have when they're doing serious grieving. So how do you deal with this? The first thing I would suggest is to seek wise guidance. Try to find somebody who is hopefully a mental health professional or a spiritual guide who has gone through the grief process. If they haven't gone through the grief process, they're not going to really understand what's going on, and they're going to expect you to get it over quickly. I knew somebody who lost their child to a drug overdose, went to a young woman for counseling, and the young woman expected her to be done grieving in a couple of weeks. Nope, this kind of thing can take years. So I would suggest finding somebody who is very adept with this, and usually not a young person because they haven't lived long enough to go through this process. And if they don't understand, if they can't relate to what you're talking about, move on. Don't waste your time. You really need somebody who understands the grief process and has been there. Second thing I would suggest is ask for specific support. People will say, oh, just let me know how I can help you. Here's my phone number. Well, they're never going to come back to you and offer anything. But if you call them up and say, I need this on this day, can you do this? You're much more likely to get support and help. I called up 14 people when I knew my son had passed. And I set up a lunch date every day. So every day, those first 2 weeks, I had somebody to talk to. And they knew what the problem was. And I said, look, I just need to talk. And I did. And that was enormously helpful. And people still came over with food, or they bought my lunch, and then somebody else came over and did chores around the house because I was just incapable of doing them because I was in so much pain. So be very specific in your requests and do ask for it because you need it. And understand at this time that your relationships will probably change. You'll probably lose some relationships that you thought were good. You'll probably gain some relationships that surprise you because pain affects people in different ways and people respond differently to pain, other people's pain. So just be open to that and be willing to accept that you will probably lose some friends. The third thing I would suggest along the same line is to be kind to yourself. Rest when you need to rest. Even if you can't sleep, lie down and don't do anything. Cry if you need to cry. Crying is a release of toxins from the body. The tears actually release toxins. So cry if you need to, rest when you need to. And another really good thing to do is take a walk in the woods every day if possible. Research shows that people who are in the woods have decreased levels of stress, decreased stress hormones, they have decreased blood pressure, they have an improvement in their mood, in their sleep, in their focus, and in their energy. The Japanese actually have a name for it. They call it forest bathing. So if it's possible for you to get into some woods, take a walk, or just sit there, that will help. They've even found that people who are in hospitals, when they have a view out a window of greenery, they recover more quickly. So it really works if you can manage to do it. Also, something else that happens is the trees actually give off essential oils because those are how they protect themselves from pests. And so you're going to be in those essential oils when you're in the woods. The fourth thing I suggest is to create external structures in your life to help you get through each day. Like have a specific thing for breakfast, like I would have a cooked apple every morning for breakfast. I would take a walk around lunchtime, and I would try to make sure I was lying down in my bed at night at a specific time. By creating structures around each day, it helps us get through the day, and it also helps us to stay grounded in this reality. The fifth thing I would suggest is to avoid comfort foods. They're called comfort foods, but their comfort lasts only during the time that the food is on the palate. After that, you're going to feel like crap because the food is crap. So it's a good idea if you can get some fresh cut up fruits and vegetables and stick them in your fridge and snack on those. Avoid soft drinks, avoid sugar. Those will mess with your blood sugar and will cause you to go into a depression. Temporary, yes, but still, it's just not advisable. And alcohol, you will feel better momentarily, but it actually slows down the grieving process. So it's not a good idea to consume alcohol when you're grieving. Take a probiotic if you can. People have found that there's a link between intestinal health and brain health. So if you have a probiotic, then that will actually help your brain to function better and help you feel a little bit better. Number 6 is to find a way to celebrate life. Set out an extra plate at the celebrations and pretend that your loved one is there. And in this group, I would imagine you would expect your loved one to actually show up. Maybe not in a way you can see, but maybe you can feel them. Maybe you can sense their presence. So do something like that to honor them. Maybe make a scrapbook. Maybe take things that they had and decorate a box and put mementos in the box. Something to commemorate them, and maybe even have a gathering with people to share favorite memories of your loved one. I appreciated that so much. Every story I got about my son meant the world to me because it was a piece of him that I was not aware of because he was 19 when he passed. The 7th step is the most important one in my mind. Now, when my son died, everybody said, oh, the 2nd year is the worst. I did not find that to be true at all because I used the process my therapist had taught me to use while I was recovering from cancer. I believe it saved my life when I had the cancer, and I believe it saved my life again when I was grieving because the cancer has stayed away. Now, in 2011, I was sent home to go to hospice. They did not expect me to live. Even after I was diagnosed, they didn't expect me to live out the year. I am now 12 years free of any cancer treatment and free of any evidence of cancer. Actually, it's 12 and a half now. So this stuff really works. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. So the process, my therapist called the map of emotions. And what it is when you have an emotion like fear, like was talked about today, or anger, or sorrow, or powerlessness. Those are the 4 main emotions that we tend to have. There are also fight, flight, and freeze responses to stress. The way to handle it is to experience that emotion. We have a chemical dump from our brain into our bodies that creates the physical sensations of our emotions. And that happens because that gives us the fight, flight, or freeze response to danger. Well, we don't live in a place where we're going to be chased by bears, generally. So we don't need that fight, flight, freeze response. But the brain still dumps the chemicals because that's what we have been doing for millions of years. So when the brain dumps the chemicals into your bloodstream, you will feel different things in your body. The process that I learned from my therapist is to actually go into our bodies and feel those emotions as physical sensations without thinking about them. There's no head involvement. The head is what gets us in trouble when we're grieving. We think all these thoughts repeatedly, and there's no way out. But if we have the thought and we get the chemical dump, then we can stop thinking and simply focus on the sensations. So for me, if I think, oh my gosh, my other son is going to die because my first son died, I get butterflies in my stomach and I feel sick. So I stop thinking, oh, what's going to happen to my other son? And I simply focus on the butterflies. And they're more like birds banging around in my stomach. But that's what the focus should be on. Now, our bodies are designed to wash that sensation, those chemicals, out of our bodies within 90 seconds. That's all it takes. So if I'm focusing on the butterflies, within 90 seconds, it will wash out of my bloodstream and there will no longer be the sensation of fear in my body. But the brain will do it again. Oh, I'm afraid I'm going to lose my son. Dump. And then I got to stop thinking I'm going to lose my son and start focusing just on the sensations. I don't think, gee, this is a long time for these sensations to leave my body. I don't think, gee, I'm really awful for having this fear going on all the time. We don't do any of that stuff. Just wait the 90 seconds and it will lift naturally. And then you will feel a sense of peace. It might be very minor, or you might feel no thing, but it will be different from the sensation of fear until you start thinking about it again. Now, sometimes the sensations will get really intense. I've had them so intense, I just wanted to jump out of my skin, but I stayed with it. You got to stay with it for 90 seconds. If you know it's going to be over in 90 seconds, it's much easier to stay with it. Now, I might have anger. I was really angry that somebody sold bad heroin to my son. So I had to sit with my rage. And one time it was so intense that I was worried that I was going to do something I would later regret. So I went to my bed and just laid down on my bed. And I had that rage. I had the chemical dump. I stayed with it. The chemical dump lifted. Rage, dump, sit with it. Rage, dump, sit with it. This went on for over an hour. And when the hour was over, I actually got an email that helped me deal with the situation. So this stuff really works. And the same thing with hurt. When I feel hurt, I feel pain in my heart. I was very hurt that my son would do what he did. So there was a lot of, I wanted to protect my heart. So I had to sit with that. And then there's powerlessness. Absolute powerlessness over losing somebody that I loved very deeply. And to me, that's like standing on a platform with a noose around my neck and the platform drops out from under me. That's how powerlessness feels to me. And that, to me, is the worst feeling. But I learned how to ride it out without thinking. Now, after 6 months after I lost my son, I had a tiny sense of joy. Like, joy? How could I possibly have joy? This is crazy. It's very minor, very small, but it was there. And that's when things started getting better for me, because I had spent 6 months sitting in my pain without trying to run away from it. And things gradually got better and better. The second year was far easier than the first one because I had done the work. And grief is called work because it is work and it's exhausting. And I could hardly do any professional work for the first 6 months. So just accept the fact that that's going to be the case. Now, our culture does not honor grief. My first job, when I was in my early 20s, my mother passed away from cancer. I took a week off. When I came back to the office, I was told that was my week of vacation for the year. So our society does not honor grief. And so you have to honor it yourself, and you have to make the space and the time to do the grieving that you need to do. So if you're really interested in this process, now I spent 6 years in therapy before I understood it well enough to do the process when I was actually needing it the most. It took me a while for me to really understand what my therapist was talking about, but I've talked about it so many times, hopefully it's clear to you. But if you want another resource, Brian, I don't know if you have any more copies. This is my book about how I survived end-stage cancer, and I have a whole section in here about how to manage emotions. If I had not had that process, I probably would have died from the cancer because I was pushing my emotions away instead of allowing them to be there. It's a very important process. and it can help you in all kinds of situations. So I'm open to any questions or thoughts or anything you have, Brian.
So, thoughts, comments? I found myself thinking of one of the deepest griefs I've carried most of my life. And I wish I'd known about these processes. Fortunately, in my case, a bit of a miracle happened, and it was the grief was replaced with a sense of joy. But there were an awful lot of years when Christmas time was pretty miserable before that. So I thank you for the information you've given.
So if you're feeling lonely, loneliness is not actually a feeling, it's hurt and sorrow. And if you can sit with that sense of loneliness and allow it to be there, it should lift within 90 seconds. And then you have to redirect your attention somewhere else. But you have to go into the emotion or it's not going to lift.
Understood. Yes, Lori K.
Heidi, thank you so much. That was absolutely beautiful. And I'm so happy that you have taken all of your loss and transformed it into this offering.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry. And so grateful for your strength. And I grieved my mother for decades. There was just nobody around to talk to really about it, you know, and it's such a very special thing finding a person who really knows how to listen and how to respond. I mean, that I find in my life anyway has been a rare thing. And so what you're talking about, you know, yeah, we do. The emotion is who we are. That's what makes us human, I feel. And when we can finally learn to communicate with ourselves emotionally, like you're talking about, like, don't go into your head and go, it has to make sense. I think that's such a powerful part of your message. And I'm really glad I'm here to hear it.
Thank you, Lori.
Somebody else with a contribution.
Looks like Christy has her hand up.
Thank you. I appreciate, hang on.
You're on mute, Christy.
Okay, I've got two phones in the room here. I appreciate what you've just gone through and being able to explain what's happening, because I am relating. It's feedback that I'm getting. I'm moving to another room because I'm hearing the echo. Okay. Interesting, because I want to correlate that with, I spent 2 hours last night because I work for a crisis line, and it was it's mandatory, but I'm just happy to be able to do it, that it was in front of me as part of our ability to know the survivors of suicide, or the families or friends or whomever the groups are left behind when one passes because they've chosen to. That was something I just experienced over this last 24 hours, as far as sitting through these videos and listening to people who were saying, and by the way, you even went further on what your process has been in the allowing. They worked through it so many different ways, but in the end of it all, understanding what you have just been able to define is very appropriate. It's very timely. And I'm going to push it further because my heart aches, not only from my mother passing at the beginning of the year, my nephew actually killing himself with alcohol because he couldn't get over a major anxiety disorder, and I'm not faulting him. But I'm probably angry because we let the mental health, in fact, that's where the suicide came in. mental health is at a paramount crisis. And in fact, that's what the drugs do, and the alcohol and the self-medicating, whatever that is, however it comes about. It's easy. We don't have the pharmaceuticals, but we'll buy them on the street or we'll do whatever in order to numb the pain instead of figuring out how we can all work that together or spot it or know it when somebody's depressed. It's not just a simple depression, and people don't talk about it. In my period of growing, it was a brokenness, and you certainly didn't want the neighbors to know what was going on outside the family or any of this information. But it's, as my sister has said, there are no more secrets. There are no more secrets. What's happening in the world with children dying, with the nation of even not getting enough to eat or a roof over their head, or the destruction that's been happening from a shutdown for a couple of years has set everybody on end. So everything that you have to say has been really wonderfully received. And I want you to know I appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Sometimes we have to view these problems as brain disease,
This is great.
because that takes it out of the mental illness thing, and it's actually something going on in the brain that's not working right. And if we can view it that way, because we don't treat cancer the way we treat mental illness or brain diseases. And if we did, people would have different attitudes about it and treat it differently.
I think
This conversation we're having reminds me of something I read in an agony column a couple or 3 years ago. One of the earlier steps you mentioned, Heidi, of making sure every day you had someone to talk with or talk to. A woman wrote in about the death of her husband, and when she got back to work, it was as if nothing had changed, and people weren't talking about it. And as she was walking down a hallway, someone she didn't know from a different part of the corporation stopped her and said, "I heard that your husband died. Will you step into this room for a minute?" And he sat down with her and he said, "Please tell me about him." And she said, "It made all the difference." And I find myself thinking, we have here this wonderful group of caring people, and I'm suggesting to all of us something we can do is the other side of what Heidi talked about. Please tell me your memories. And be that listening, caring person, at the same time being connected with the divine so that we can hear it and bring loving energy to the person who is grieving.
Listening is a beautiful gift. It really is.
there are also lines out there that are being more readily opened up. The line that I work for had been funded highly, and they're adding extra people massively in order to pick up the lines. You have one out of Cincinnati, by the way, that's 513-281-CARE. And they don't cut you off, and they'll do as much in the day as you need to. And it's a very important line to know, and they can give you more resources. So is 988. 988 will and maybe put you through some questions as far as suicide, as to see where you are. They may or may not, but they're in the interim, and then they go further for resources, and they will do some talk.
Cool.
Yes,
Lori Kay.
I hope I'm not stopping anybody else from talking, but I did want to say that I think a lot of grief could be alleviated, a lot of depression could be alleviated, a lot of anxiety, if we had that space. And maybe we can even actually do it, Brian, where we come together for like story nights, where because you're not only losing a person, you're also losing a life, your own, like the life that you recognized from before is now gone. And you have to rebuild a reason for living and a way to live. And I mean, it's, not everybody wants to swim in the deep waters, but I think hearing about the people who you lost, hearing about why they were so special, I think is interesting to people. And I think it would be so helpful, as Heidi said.
Speaking of which, it occurs to me to mention, Eric, when he's not working on Sundays, he sits back here. He got a call on Thursday while he was doing some painting for us here, telling him, or Wednesday, telling him that the nursing home he worked for was closing the entire security department out and he was out of work. So,
Tell him to call me, please.
I intend to. He and I have missed connections, but I'm going to give him your connection. So, hold him in prayer, and I'll suggest that we're more than happy to talk to him, and I will direct him to you, Lori Kay. I've already told him I plan to. So that's my additional contribution. Anybody else with any thoughts or comments or something to share about your own walk?
I remember having a strange sensation looking out the window and seeing cars go by. It's like, how can you be doing that? My son just died. So it's just a weird place to be when you're in shock like that.
Anybody else with a contribution right now? Liz, yes.
Heidi, I just wanted to say thank you. That was very inspiring and very helpful to me because I lost my husband and my son,
Yeah.
and it's been a process to move through. So thank you so much for sharing from your heart. Very helpful.
And I'm so sorry for both of those losses. That's
Thank you.
tragic.
Thank you.
Thank you, God, for bringing us together, for having brought us Heidi to give us this wonderful message in preparation for a time when so many people will be hurting. Thank you for placing us in situations where we can take what we have just learned and use it to help someone or someones who are hurting. Thank you for giving us faith in our own ability to follow your leading, the connection with the Spirit to open our mouths and trust that words appropriate to you will come out. Thank you for giving us this community to which we can repair for our own support and our own learnings. Thank you for the miracles you have worked in our lives and are continuing to work in our lives. Thank you for the prosperity that enables us to walk forward in comfort and in more comfort. Thank you for the prosperity of wisdom, the abundance of wisdom that you continue to give us so we can be ever more faithful stewards of your wisdom and your love on this earth. We say thank you for all this good. Thank you, and amen.
Amen.